talk at the microphone. Some of them did. We're going to recount what they said, what they thought of the day's proceedings. Joining me right now, Fox 2 Detroit's Roop Raj. Roop, thanks for being with us here today. A big day on Capitol Hill. What were your key takeaways?
Nothing was a huge surprise here. We knew, of course, that the jurists in this case, the Democrats, would sit back and talk a little bit about what happened on January 6th by taking us back to that dramatic day and showing video clips of, yes, the speech, but also the insurrection that followed. I think from there, you absolutely understood that there was going to be an argument as to whether or not all of those people should have been in the room in the first place. The bottom line is today's arguments were all about, Andrew, as you know, whether or not this trial is even constitutional in the first place. A little after 5 o'clock this evening, it was determined by a vote that it was indeed constitutional, and that vote consisted of 6 Republicans and 50 Democrats. So a 56-44 vote, essentially saying, yes, we can move forward to tomorrow, and that is, of course, when opening arguments do begin.
Rube, I was struck by the fact that they just had this vote last week. I know this is a procedural motion that they had to do today, but we kind of already knew where, especially Republican senators, would fall. Why did they do it again?
Well, I think, like you said, it is procedural, and it has to be done right there on the Senate floor, and that's something that obviously they knew they would be doing. There's also a chance, obviously, between the time that they had met last time and this time that perhaps someone could have been compelled or moved to vote otherwise. But in this case, we know that really wasn't much of the case, as 6 of these Republicans are the same 6 Republicans who for some time have been speaking out about what the president did on January 6th. I think it'll be very interesting to take a look at what happens as we move forward here. You know, you talk about 16 hours, Andrew, 16 hours for each side to essentially present their case in their opening arguments that begin on Wednesday. And keep in mind that 16 hours sounds like a long time, but Andrew, you've covered the first trial as well. You know that trial actually consisted of 24 hours of opening arguments for each side. And so you think about the length of how long this is going to be, 16 hours for both sides. It is expected that Trump's attorneys won't even take up the entire 16 hours, perhaps in a show of confidence as to where they think their case stands right now. The big question here, I find it interesting, Andrew, when you zoom out and you take a look at this particular trial and what's happening here, the big situation here, the big question that needs to be asked is, what did President Trump at the time, that then President Trump, mean when he spoke before the insurrection? Did he say, hey, I'm urging my supporters to advocate for election reform? Or was he instead saying that I advocate that you fight like hell right now and that you go and disrupt and overturn the process that was about to take place inside the Senate? And that is really the crux of the question here, Andrew, that needs to be asked is, what did he mean by what he said? The Trump attorneys, both very, very smart guys, David Shane and Bruce Castor Jr., both said, look, when the president said things like fight like hell, he meant that figuratively and not literally. Andrew?
And right, one of the main arguments that they'll use is the First Amendment defense. We do want to talk about, the defense and the prosecution and kind of break down what was said today, the kind of theatrics and emotions as well. You had, both sides, Jamie Raskin and I believe shown on the other side, at one point breaking down in tears, Jamie Raskin, who just lost his son right after Christmas to suicide, having to lead up this effort. We were also getting just some word from some of those Republican senators on what they thought of the Trump defense. And Roop, not a lot of them were very impressed. They were kind of citing it, calling it meandering, disjointed. Have you been following any of the Republican reaction to Trump's defense today?
I have. And when you take a look at what the Republicans have been saying, again, you take a look at how that vote kind of went down and the numbers, and you see that obviously there were 6 Republicans that believe that this is a constitutional trial that should move forward. Many of the other Republicans were basically saying that this is, as you say, his First Amendment right to be able to come out and speak. One of the Republicans who is most vocal on the Senate floor said, you got to be kidding me. Are we saying that a president can no longer object or be able to voice his opinion about the political process? Is that what we're saying today? They essentially were saying that, this amendment is being robbed by the Democrats, who are saying that you can't say that stuff. But, if you listen to Mr. Raskin and his emotional plea, talking about his family, coming to the Senate floor on January 6th because he was still so devastated by his son's death, and then having been separated right before the insurrection started, as kids were hiding under the desk, and then he heard the banging on the door. He was doing this all with tears, but the bottom line is the Republicans who testified later on basically said, yeah, we understand that the insurrection and the small number of people, as they pointed out, that were violent on the Senate floor, no one is defending that. But what they were saying is whether or not the president actually had any kind of a bearing on whether or not these folks would go out and do what they did, they would argue, Trump's attorneys, that Trump had absolutely no idea that what was about to happen happened.
Yeah, and I'm just trying to draw parallels to last year's impeachment and what we're witnessing today. And this is going to be a very quick trial. We still don't know if they'll call witnesses, likely not. So that makes it much different. Remember back last year, they didn't as well. So I was kind of struck by the fact that this will be very quick. Remember, Senator Mitch McConnell, when he was majority leader at the time, he could have called this trial to happen, right after the fact, January 16th. Sure. So what will you be looking for tomorrow, Roop?
Well, I think you're really going to start seeing a little bit more of what we saw today. Obviously, those videos are very dramatic. You talked a little bit about the witnesses in the first impeachment trial. There were so many things that happened in rooms that no one was privy to ever see, that they had to bring these witnesses in to basically spell out conversations and things that had happened in different points in that particular trial, talking about what happened. In this case, everything that happened quickly on January 6th. The speech happened, and then just a few hours later, the insurrection happened. That's going to be the main thing. I think the main most compelling piece of evidence from the Democrats in this particular case is going to be those pieces of video, and of course, trying to tie in and illustrate that the speech that happened right beforehand had everything to do with what these folks did just in the few moments after that. Again, 16 hours apiece. Trump's attorneys, Mr. Castor, Mr. Shane, are going to say, look, what Mr. Trump did was just use what as they call typical political language. This is his First Amendment right. But of course, first you're going to hear the Democrats lay out their case for why this president should be impeached. And it's going to be, I think, filled with video and lots of testimony that's going to have emotion and lots of video that they'll try to tie in with the speech.
All right, Fox 2's Roop Rauch, thank you so much for breaking that all down and what we saw today, all day, frankly. Really, the trial hasn't essentially gotten started. They were just making their opening arguments today, and we'll be carrying it live on NewsNOW throughout the week. Thanks, Roop.
Good to see you.
All right, and we will be following that story, obviously, for...